Hello, and welcome to the Argyle AI Decision Maker Summit. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Michael Arulfo, AI Principal Enterprise Architect in the Office of the CIO at Boston Scientific. We're really excited to have Michael with us for a keynote presentation titled The Foundations for Creating an AI Architecture Strategy for Your Organization. Welcome, Michael. Over to you.
Thank you, Nick. And I am thrilled to join you guys here today at the Argyle Summit. This is my first keynote of 2024, and that's always exciting. The energy is always awesome, and this is I truly believe that this is the year for AI and especially generative AI. I feel like last year was a great setup year. I'm sure most of you went through the very same journey, which is I'm going to talk about today with AI. Once ChatGPT came out in the fall of around November of 2022, and really boomed around March of 2023. So I will share what lessons I've learned, some key concepts and ideas through that journey with you today. So a little bit first about who I am. As Nick said, I'm an AI Principal Enterprise Architect at Boston Scientific in the CIO office. Additionally to that, I'm board chairman of Beta.min, which is a tech accelerator in Minnesota, the largest and the longest running. It's been running for about 10 years. And Beta's mission is to educate tech startup founders so they can be more successful in their startup venture. I've been in the industry a long time, 20 years, over 20 years in the tech industry. So I'm a solid veteran. I like to say that I lived through 3 recessions, and I started my career during the dot-com boom. I'm also a member of the Chief Architect Forum, which is a global organization of chief architects. So that's where I get have a lot of my conversations with other lead architects in the industry to help sharpen my vision and my skill set. I've experienced in the 20+ years I've been in the industry across working in different CIO offices, most notably the Mayo Clinic, Optum, and United Healthcare. And recently, last year, I spent a lot of time in intense training, and even before then, in training in digital transformation, starting at University of California, Berkeley. That's where initially I got my AI training in digital transformation in one of their digital transformation programs. And as of last year, I did 2 formal programs at MIT. So I'll get more into my background with MIT. Boston Scientific has a special relationship with MIT, but that's also shaped my experience and education around AI and generative AI from last year specifically. So why should you listen to me? Other than the fact that I've been in the industry a long time, I've been an architect of those 20 years, about half the time as an architect in different capacities and different roles in different organizations. So what I found as I've been doing these presentations around generative AI and last year I did this several times for locally for different virtual summits and conferences like Argyle. What I found as I started through my experience is there wasn't a lot of individuals talking about architecture the way an architect sees it, and specifically an enterprise architect. There was a lot of consultants, a lot of product vendors, a lot of marketing people, a lot of sales people, a lot of media people, obviously a lot of data scientists and even data engineers. And all that is good. But what I found was there wasn't a lot of architects talking about AI, specifically generative AI. And I think that's an important perspective that needs to be part of the conversation, because an architect sees things in a very unique way, a very much an end-to-end enterprise vision of the organization. And if that's missing in this conversation as we continue down the AI journey, I don't think that's a good thing. So as I realized that, I realized I have to really get out there intentionally, be one of those architects that's providing that perspective in the conversation and dialogue, because it's very, very important. I believe that AI and a lot due to the generative AI popularity we experienced last year, I believe that is the foundations for one of the most important technology revolutions of our time. I think you only see a technology like this every 20 years. So it's very, very important, given that that's the situation, to have an architectural viewpoint in the conversation. And as I discovered last year, I didn't see that a lot. And I attended lots of organizational events, sat on lots of panels, gave lots of different presentations like this. And as I discovered last year, it's just not common to provide that architectural viewpoint. So I think that's important. So and also get beyond a lot of the hype. I mean, there's you turn on a newscast these days, everybody's talking about AI. There's a lot of marketing obviously involved. And as I've discovered, everybody's a so-called AI expert, right? I think it's important to go beyond that. And I want to deliver some of that perspective to you today based on my experiences. And hopefully once I give you those tools, give you those concepts, it'll allow you to connect the dots like I have, and to understand the AI landscape as it currently is manifesting in the industry. So a little bit of disclaimer. This content it's my personal views and does not represent the viewpoint of Boston Scientific. It is based on my experiences, so that's important, and my training and education. But I'm not here to give you, the perspective specifically of Boston Scientific. Really more of an industry-wide view, and also giving you the tools and concepts that you can apply in any industry and in any organization. So so what is AI, and specifically what is an AI practice? This is how I like to start my presentations, because I think it grounds the conversation that we're going to have, and it grounds the content that I'm going to give you. So I'd like to shift when a lot of people talk about AI, and specifically Gen AI, they talk a lot about the history of AI, talk a lot about like the technical aspects of it. And how I like to begin these conversations is I want to talk about AI as a practice, and why that is important, because then you get that holistic perspective of artificial intelligence and that pragmatic viewpoint of what it actually takes to get value out of AI. Instead of because if I only focus on one of these things, and a lot of folks focus either on the data science or the data engineering with the technology, there's a lot of hype and a lot of misconceptions, a lot of marketing that's involved. And so I want to shift the conversation towards what is an AI practice. And there's 4 different elements of that. There's the data science piece, which is obviously very, very important, gets the lion's share of the media attention and the marketing, because that is the sexy part of the technology, right? That's the really, really cool things. That's the large language models. That's the digital transformation, automation pieces of it. So naturally, because that's the sexy part of the technology, that gets the lion's share of the marketing and the media. What often gets lost and doesn't get covered, but is equally important in the mix of actually getting value from AI, are the other 3 components. Number 1, the AI monitoring and deployment. When you get AI, you actually have to deploy it. And I'll go more into this deeper into the presentation. But that is really, really, really important, and need to have plans in your roadmap to allow that capability and mature that capability in your organization. The other two parts is involving more the engineering side. Data engineering specifically, nobody really talks about it in the context of these AI conversations, often overlooked. But AI, if you're going to get value out of it, and if you're going to develop it as a capability for the organization, you're going to have to look at and invest in data engineering and data architecture. And that is often overlooked. The other piece, because the popularity of large language model solutions, generative AI, is the app dev. So users need a good experience to interact with the AI. And you're going to have to build different applications. They're going to have to account for that. So that has to be something that is intentional and built as part of your overall AI practice. So three key takeaways from today that I want to give you. One is give you some foundational principles, 3 principles, and 3 insights, which are key lessons that I've learned in my personal journey working on AI solutions at the enterprise level. The second thing is a framework for understanding the AI landscape. That is one of the key things that my boss assigned to me very, very early on when I took this new role at Boston Scientific early part of last year. His first task was, I need you to teach me about generative AI. I don't even have an idea what the landscape looks like. And there was, at that time, so much hype and hoopla around generative AI. Everybody's talking about it, all the way from the boardroom to the senior executive level to everything, after that. It was always in the news. So he's like, I need you to cut through the hype, give me an idea of what this landscape looks like so we can have a conversation. So one of the first things I developed was a common framework that we could constantly revisit as we had the conversation around generative AI. So I'm going to share that framework with you as a concept, because it's something that you can use practically as soon as we're done today, and you can continually apply it to your own organization and under your specific use cases, and you can revisit that framework as the technology and as the industry evolves, because it will. And the third piece is some of the latest trends into the use cases that I've seen across industries. And as you're going to see, I actually provided that into the example of the framework. So we can talk about that. And at the end of the conversation, at the end of this presentation, I'm happy to answer any of your questions around any one of these 3 things. So let's dive into it. Principle number 1, bring the AI development to the data. Sounds easy, but yet it's one of the hardest things. And sometimes it can be depending upon your organization's data strategy, one of the most revolutionary things that I'm going to talk to you about today. So, and why is that? Because data practices, what's been popular is you want to centralize the data. So it's one of the things that I learned in conversations with the professors that taught me at MIT was they're looking at they're very excited because they're looking at generative AI as one of those revolutionary things that can democratize data, right? And so think about that. What's been popular up to this point is a centralized approach. But now we're talking about democratizing data, which has huge implications. So if you take that to its logical conclusion, then it doesn't make sense to start moving data around so you can bring it to where you're doing your model development. Instead, if you're democratizing your data and democratizing your data architecture, then the converse it should apply. You want to move your development, your model, which means your model training, the work that you're doing with those models, to where the data resides. And it's very much in line with the current trends today in data practices. So that is important. And it also prevents you from putting unneeded risk in terms of what your data security. And it also enables the business to take more ownership of not only the data, which is they're the subject matter experts, depending on domain, but it also enables them to take ownership of the actual solution. It's not a guarantee, and oftentimes there's a lot of challenges with that. But at least if you follow this principle to its core, then it introduces that conversation up front. So you're not having the conversation at the end. So that is an important principle that I've learned. Bring the AI development to the data. Number two is keep it simple, particularly in the beginning, and build your solutions in a single environment with the native products. This is particularly important in the beginning as organizations go through the evolution. And I saw this a lot last year. One of my good friends, Matthew Versace, he worked at Optum AI with me. And one of the important things he taught me was that there is 4 common stages of an organization as it progresses through the AI journey. The first is always the experimental stage. The second is the centralization stage, where AI, the AI expertise, the AI projects are centralized. This third stage is once the organization matures and there's enough AI capability and skills within the organization, there's a natural dispersal of the solution development of different AI solutions and capabilities across the organization. There's that some people call it decentralization. And the fourth stage, which very few organizations are at, but definitely is the goal, is having the organization be very AI-centric in its decision-making, and it uses AI very strategically. But what I'm referring to in this principle here in number 2 is that first stage. During the experimental stage, people are developing a lot of MVPs and POCs. Keep it simple at that stage. And I would argue throughout even the latter stages of the AI maturity cycle, that it's important to keep it simple because it prevents the scaling issues at the end. Once you go beyond the MVP and the business decides to fully invest in an AI solution or key capability, they have to scale it across the organizations to get that full benefit and the value. So the more complex you make that AI solution, then the harder it is to scale. So as a rule, keep it simple, and that's why I've added it as the second principle here. Number 3, treat data as a product and follow the data governance or whatever governance process you have with your solution development. And this is very, very important in AI-based solutions because, well, number one, with generative AI, chances are, if you're actually doing live projects, I experienced this last year, is there's a whole lot of oversight, a lot of regulations, new legislations being drafted. AI as a whole has gotten the attention of governments. And so there's a lot of attention as soon as you slap on the label of generative AI on any of your projects. So with that added attention, it's even more important to be careful about how you handle the data, and you need to follow those governance processes from a security and regulatory standpoint. I work in healthcare, which is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world. So heightened awareness for me. Other industries is not so important, but even in industries that aren't as highly regulated as healthcare, I still feel like this third principle applies. Your organization, from a maturation standpoint, should be treating data as a product. Your organization will benefit from that. The business will own the data. You'll ultimately be able to understand the data better with that degree of ownership. So even if you're not, you can use, and then it allows you to use tools like data catalogs. So even if you're not operating in a heavily regulated industry, I would argue that treating data as a product and leveraging tools like data catalogs is to your advantage as an organization, particularly as you scale up the solutions. And as AI is so heavily dependent on the quality of your data, the more you adhere to principle number 3 and apply it in your organization, the better off you're going to be. So now I'm going to go through some of the key insights that I've learned. The first one, through my journey, the first one is have a human in the loop when designing workflow processes. This really came to my attention as I was working on a lot of more business sensitive data, like if that's going to go out to the customer, or just more highly sensitive in nature. But particularly with like marketing projects, if you're launching different marketing campaigns, you're sending content out and you're drawing from specific product content that the organization has generated. So in the projects that I've worked on in this space, it's important to have a human in the loop when you're looking at workflow, because it's important to follow that's again back to the governed state, following the governance process, which I referred to in the previous principle. Definitely applies in a case where you're doing like marketing campaigns, where you need that human to look at that content right before it gets actually sent out and gets consumed by an application or by the platform that's going to send it out, either post it on the company's website, or it's going to go out in the form of campaigns that's going out directly to customers or key stakeholders that the company wants to engage in during the sales cycle. Need to have that human in the loop when designing these workflow processes. Insight number 2 is be vigilant and ensure there's a method to monitor the AI. It's commonly known that LLMs, they're going to hallucinate. But even outside of the LLM realm, where you're dealing specifically with a large language model that is going to hallucinate, so you need to make sure that there is a adequate monitoring method. Other AI solutions that I worked on with digital transformations, those models have a tendency to drift. So you need to have, either way, whether you're using an LLM or a traditional like machine learning model, you need to ensure that there is adequate monitoring capabilities in your architecture, in your strategy, because they're not infallible. And over time, even once you put them in production, you're going to need to manage and monitor them to make sure they stay accurate and you're generating the content that you expect, and also you're ensuring the accuracy of those models, whether you're using them for prediction or classification, which is very, very common. You want to ensure that the accuracy of those models, and to do that, you need to be vigilant and have those monitoring processes and capabilities built into your architecture strategy. Third lesson, and this is one that I put in for the engineers out there that are actually working. So if you're like a data engineer, if you're an app dev engineer, if you're in the DevOps area, this is one that any one of those teams are going to shout from the rooftop. Think about, and that is about AI deployment. So this insight's all about thinking about that and not just about the data science. And again, this goes back to what I said in the very beginning. Where does the lion's share of the media hype, the marketing, the sales conversations lie? In about the data science. So often gets overlooked is the fact that, and this is even true, like in the internal processes, a lot of the attention gets put, especially in the beginning, to working on the data science aspects of the solution, right? And sort of an afterthought that to think about how am I actually going to deploy this solution in production. And so that is really, really important because how you're not going to really get value from that solution, whether you're working with LLMs or any kind of AI models in any kind of solution, unless you deploy it in production. Sounds elementary, but it's often overlooked. And if you're not mature in those processes, there can be lots and lots of delays. So I put this picture in there because you can see these people here. Like this is, imagine that the two people here on the cliff, that's like where the data scientists reside and the data analysts, they're working on LLMs. And you can see this massive chasm and canyon. And on the other side is like the production deployment. So you can see, and that's often an illustration I like to refer to, that there is to point out that there is often a large chasm in thinking in AI solutions, and when you're thinking about just the data science and you're not considering the deployment. Okay, so now on to the strategic framework. So and this will help you when you're trying to get sense of the AI landscape. I constructed it specifically for my boss in the beginning, but I've used this framework successfully in pretty much all my strategic conversations to really lay out the landscape for folks so they can understand at a better level about what is going on and how to think about AI from an enterprise perspective, right? So 5 layers. Think about this. First one is about citizen coding, and that's low code, no code solutions. You need to satisfy that because, as you're going to see in the next slide, there's use cases that are emerging, which are really targeted towards low code, no code development. So solutions that don't require formal training and technical training like coding skills. But a lot of organizations, as they're going down this journey, are going to need to have that ability to develop quick solutions without having to always engage IT. So that is what layer one is all about. The second layer is enterprise solutions, and this is when people think about AI, just like and also applies to the third layer, which is the data science and processing. When I think about AI products and AI solutions and AI strategy, these are the two most common areas that people think about. Enterprise solutions being the very, very specific types of solutions that are heavily regulated. They reach out to data that is highly sensitive, like HR or financial, or even specific IT data. And so you don't want to give users the ability to just develop and access that data without some degree of governance and engagement with the technical resources. So that's what number two is all about. Number three is the data science process. So these are custom solutions that require training, working with the language models directly for enhancement, and require a high degree of technical solutioning, or developing an AI model through the traditional machine learning process. That is what the third layer is all about. And number four is enterprise capabilities. This is like your enterprise platforms that are often developed. And the idea of that is these are the capabilities that can be leveraged with the solutions from the other three layers. So layers 1, 2, and 3. And then the fifth one is all about the data. I originally, when I constructed this framework, I didn't include that, but I got so many questions about data as I started to socialize it. I decided to just put in another layer about the data. And this is all about data ingestion, the data pipelines. So with this abstraction of the 5 layers, what does this actually look like? So on this last slide, I'm going to give you an example of how you can apply this framework as an industry-wide format. So this is not specific to an organization, but this gives you some ideas about what that's going to look like and what that could possibly look like when you apply the framework to your own organization. So this is what it looks like here. You can see layer 1, that's the low-code layer, that's the layer in green. And I want to point out the two use cases that are very, very common that are appearing across industries. I'm talking to my peers in different companies and also across industries. One is the chatbot, and the other is code documentation. So and I emphasize, not you would expect like code generation to be a big one, but as I found in my personal experience, and I have a lot of friends who are engineers, that code generation is being used on and again and off again, but still in largely experimental stages. And also, when you're talking about code generation, you're introducing a very the riskier area of like legal policies regarding the generation and use of code. So it's still an area that needs to be developed and worked out from the legal perspective. So not so popular, but documenting code is not the same use case. So it's gotten a lot more traction in a lot of practices versus the code generation. And the other one is the chatbot, of course, with the popularity of LLMs and ChatGPT. This is a common one, and what I'm seeing a lot these days from a use case development is pick a bunch of documents or data source that has a lot of business value, and people want to have conversations with it and talk about it, get recommendations from it. So that gives the rise to that popularity of the chatbot use case. You can see the second layer, which is the dark blue. This is the enterprise use case. This is where a lot of big platforms and a lot of companies are targeting right now. All the major players like Salesforce, SAP, you can see them all bringing up and building in generative AI features into their platform. So that's largely popular. You can see here that's a lion's share of the use cases that I've called out. Number 3 is that specifically focused on the data science and processing. And you can see here, again, the major players like Microsoft with Azure, Amazon, Google, you got IBM here with Watson, Snowflake has even now entered the foray with their model training and development. And that's so that is largely popular. That's everything in the light blue. With the forward light being, again, I mentioned, similarly, and a key part of the data science um, um, value stream is number 4, which is the enterprise platform. So what I've done here is break out those capabilities that regardless of what type of solution you're developing and no matter which environment you're using, whether it's Azure, Amazon, or Google, you leverage these capabilities commonly across your company. And so those are the capabilities that I noted here in the 4th layer. And then the 5th one, again, I got this question so many times, I finally added it as a layer. Where does the data play into it, right? So your main data source is being connected, and depending upon your company, you're either going to have at least one data platform, probably multiple, to be able to bring that data into the different environments that you're going to use for training your models. So that connects you to that light blue 3rd layer, which is that model training and development, or as data scientists call it, the auto ML capability. It also refers to, and you can see that here, if you're going to use an LLM, these are some of the most common sources. Now I know I need to update this because I know Apple's now put out Ferret. Snowflake has put out Cortex. So there's other LLM sources that I haven't included, but these are the most common ones, with covering both private and the public with Hugging Face, and the private options with Azure and AWS, and now Google with Gemini. So Nick, are there questions for me?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, we actually don't have time for questions,
Oh,
but we could send them to you from the audience. But thank you again so much for an excellent keynote. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.